Welcome to Allegiance to the King. This is our Wednesday night online church we call Christian Virtual Fellowship. And you can check us out at the website here at a2kchurch.org, as well as on Facebook, where we have a Christian Virtual Fellowship page, as well as an Allegiance to the King group that you should be able to find and have to ask to be invited to, but we'd love to have you join us online or on Zoom. I just got back from Africa, spending a little over 2 weeks in Uganda with our brothers and sisters there at Allegiance to the King Uganda, and visiting a number of the churches and meeting a lot of the pastors. I had a great time. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. I'm gonna share some photos. I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I taught while I was there. For those of you who are here this evening, if you've got a question, feel free to ask it at any time. We don't need to wait until the end to do questions. So if you'll raise your hand as we go, I'd be happy to answer whatever question or whatever. Or if you've got something, thoughts about, something, that would be great too. So let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll start going through some of these photos. So I've been working with some Ugandans now for about 2 years, and meeting every Friday morning, our time here in the US. It's their evening time on Friday when we get together and doing teachings and training and just fellowship, getting to know them and things like that. In the course of that, they started, growing and getting more people involved. And this year, we formed an organization in Uganda that is the official organization of A2K Uganda. And so I know I'm going to leave things out tonight. There was so much that happened, so much that's been going on. So hopefully I'll remember to talk about all the good stuff. Anyway, so we got our first photograph here. And so on the right is Chris Esben. I did find out Esben is sort of an online name. His actual last name is Enoch. And so that's Chris Enoch. And he is the executive director for A2K Uganda. And Chris is great. It was, I've known Chris now for several years. I just love Chris so much, and he's such a good man, and he works very hard and to help support what we're doing there. In the middle, that is Fiona, and her last name is a little challenging for me. Nakalusa. I'm going to butcher it. It's maybe somebody else here will remember how to pronounce it. But Fiona is our treasurer and secretary for the organization. I've known, and many of you, if you're on the virtual church, you know Fiona. She's on most Sundays. And on the left, this is Laban. And I just had gotten introduced to Laban a few days before the trip. Laban drove us around in Kampala, and he's been a pastor for quite a few years. He's been working for the past couple of years with Spirit and Truth Fellowship, and he was just a great guy. I really, really liked him a lot. We got to spend some good time together in Kampala. It had a lot of things in common. It was very obvious that the Lord was putting us together to work together. So I'm looking forward to talking to him more. So I took this picture because they greeted me, right? This is at the airport in Kampala, and I just come out of customs, and so I wanted to get a picture of the three of them. So I took this picture, not realizing that just over Laban's right shoulder is Tim Geddes. He was being kind of quiet, hanging in the background, hadn't introduced himself yet. I met Tim a couple of months ago. Tim was at the UCA conference in the UK this past summer, and we got connected through Mark Kane. Tim lives part of the year, and part of the time of the year he lives in Uganda, part in the UK. He actually lives on an island in Lake Victoria. So Tim's great. I really liked him a lot, and he was originally going to come with us for the whole trip, but he had to have some surgery done, so he wasn't able to join us. But he was able to meet with us in Kampala. So this is at the hotel in Kampala. It's a nice Marriott type hotel there. And just to introduce a few additional people here. On the right, the young man in the white t-shirt, that is Nicholas. And Nicholas lives on the same island with Tim. We got connected through Tim. Nicholas, he was just on fire for God, and he really wanted to come with us for the trip. And since Tim couldn't come, and we had some extra accommodations that we'd already paid for, and we're going to go to waste, Nicholas came with us for the I think in all it was about 11 days that we were traveling around eastern Uganda. On the left, the gentleman in the pink shirt, that is Pacifique Benny and his wife Madeline, and they are with the Church of God General Conference. He's a pastor in the Church of God in Uganda. They live in far southwestern Uganda. So they came to meet me in Kampala. They also joined us for the last couple of days for the pastors meeting that we had. And Pastor Pacific was just a wonderful, wonderful man. I was just so very, very, very much. He's kind of got a sort of a sleepy or an angry look in this picture here. Caught it just at a bad moment. But he has the most infectious smile. It just again, just a very humble servant of God. So we spent a couple of days in Kampala. We had a meeting the second night that I was there with about 20 or 25 people, and it was really, really, really good. I got a few pictures. I need to get some more pictures from Fiona. So this is Fiona, her sister Olivia, and their mother, and I always forget her name. Um, oh gosh, it's gonna slip my mind. Um, and so it was really, really great, meeting them. Olivia is a regular on our Friday meetings. She's almost always on Fridays, and so we had a great time.
Her name is Florence.
Fiona,
Florence,
yeah, Fiona's mom is Florence.
thank you, thank you. Um, this is Jackson. Jackson was our driver for the whole trip, and he was great. He was a great driver, got us around, just a really great guy. This is on the road to Eastern Uganda, and I took this picture because I wanted to kind of show what a lot of the sort of roadsides are like throughout Uganda. They have these little shops along the side of the road in any town that you go through is going to have a number of these, and they're basically little storefronts. You can see in the building here there's a little clothing shop on the left. I'm not sure, maybe like a little grocery store in the middle, and then a pharmacy on the right. And this is for a lot of Uganda. It was like this. I was really surprised. The roads were a lot better than I was expecting. The main road between Kampala and Bukedea, where we had our first meetings, was really just for most of it as good as any U.S. highway. And so but there one thing that's really different there is that the roads are used, even what we would consider highways, are used by cars, commercial traffic, motorcycles, bicycles, pedestrians. They just kind of, pedestrians and bicycles are kind of on the sides of the road. I took this picture. Life is very different in other countries. So what we're looking at here is this is a motorcycle. This is a typical motorcycle in Uganda. It has a kind of a flat bench seat, and you can see there's a guy in the front. You can kind of see his little gray shirt there, and then there was a woman behind him in this socket here. And this red and white thing to the side, that is a sock hat on her baby that she's holding. So they're just running down the road on the motorcycle, and she's just holding that baby. And you definitely in the U.S. you definitely get pulled over for that. So, and it's just you sometimes you'd see 3 or 4 people on a motorcycle. If it's a motorcycle taxi, which that might have been a motorcycle taxi, they call it a boda there. I did learn a number of words. I learned, how to greet someone in Ateso. The 2 main languages, official languages in Uganda, are English and Luganda. But Luganda is the language of the Buganda people that live in that tribe is kind of the central part of the country. Where we were for most of the trip was in the eastern part of the country, which is the Teso people, and they speak Ateso. And so the words that I learned were all Ateso words. So, for instance, when you're going to greet somebody with a kind of a hello, it's the word yoga. And so if you want to emphasize something, you add noi. So if you want to give a warm, enthusiastic greeting, you would say yoga noi. This was at our first meeting in Bukedea. We spent 2 days in Bukedea. This was pretty well attended meeting. We had upwards of 200 or 300 people at this meeting. The first day, and it's interesting because we had a lot of pastors here. Not all of the pastors were from, were associated with Allegiance to the King or other biblical Unitarian ministries. You can see the gentleman kind of right in the center sitting there. I think it was like Episcopalian, that kind of denomination that he was from. You can see his collar there. And there was quite a few pastors there from other denominations that had come to check things out. And the whole time they would have somebody translating. Most people speak English, but they would still, they'd always have a translator, even if it wasn't, me. If there were, 2 of the pastors up, one of the pastors would be speaking, the other one would be translating. Sometimes they'd be translating into Ateso, and sometimes they would be translating into English, depending upon what language the speaker was speaking in. And there were people with us. Most of the people here in the audience, they are all Teso, and they speak Ateso. But there were people at the conference who, like Fiona, doesn't speak Ateso, and so or myself. So they'd always have a translator. The first day, I taught on the gospel of the kingdom of God, and it was good. It was well received. A lot of good questions. The second day, I taught on basically Unitarianism. I presented a teaching that I've done here in the U.S. where it's designed. I go through about 40 or 45 verses, all showing that the Father is God, that Jesus is not God, that the Father is God. And verses that talk about Jesus having a God, that Father is Jesus is God and stuff like that. I find that it's pretty powerful list to show, hey, Jesus is not God, the Father is God. And it's just verse after verse after verse after verse after verse all throughout the New Testament. And then we had some good questions. One of the questions was, what about John 1:1? That's always, that's going to be in the first, one or two questions asked if you're in a situation like this. Well, what about John 1:1? And so I did something that it was the first time I believe it's the first time I've actually formally taught on my view of what John 1:1 is talking about, which is a little different than the typical two or three biblical Unitarian or Unitarian explanations of John 1:1. Just briefly, I went through and I showed how the typical the normal usage of logos or word in context with God, so word of God, is in the New Testament is the gospel. It's not the Bible. It's not like a generic sense of God's wisdom or something like that. It's the normal usage throughout the entire New Testament, including the Gospel of John, is the gospel. And then so what I believe about is going on with John 1:1 is it's in the beginning, it's talking about the gospel. In the beginning was the word, um, you know, in the beginning was the gospel. And the word was with God, the gospel was with God, and then and the word was God. I haven't formally taught this yet. I will for sometime next year. That there's several different ways to understand that phrase, and you can make a really good case that the word for God in that phrase is being used like an adjective, and it's qualifying the gospel. And then if you go into two of the other gospels, Mark and Luke, they have similar beginnings of the gospel to John, where they talk about in the beginning, that kind of phraseology, the beginning of the gospel. And then they move on to talking about John the Baptist, and then they get to Jesus, exactly like John does in his opening. He just does it more poetically than either Mark or Luke do. So the three gospels have very, very similar beginnings in terms of their approach and the fact that they're talking about, the beginning of the gospel. And so there's a lot more, there's personification going on, certainly in the first chapter of John. But the gospel is being personified. And so it was my first opportunity to, this thing that I've been working on for a while, to kind of trot that out and try it out. And the guy who asked the question seemed pretty satisfied with the answer. So I felt like that was good. Here you can see from the back, one of the issues in Uganda is the power. A lot of the times it's not reliable. So they actually had a generator sitting outside. This is actually in a hotel in Bukedea. And we're on the third floor of that building. One of the things coming into Uganda that I only learned a few days before is that Uganda is at a pretty high elevation. Essentially, Kampala on Lake Victoria is a little over 4,000 feet elevation. Where I live, even though I'm in the middle of the US, we're in the Ohio and Mississippi Valley. And so we're only about 240 feet above sea level, where here in Western Kentucky. So it's a little bit of an adjustment, when you come from sea level to 4,000 or 5,000 feet. let's see. One of the things that they did that was so cool. Oh, you know what? I'm going to play this. I'm going to have to reshare. Let me do that. In order to get the music to come through. They had a basically a local band come and play some traditional instruments, and it just sounded so cool. Let's do this. Let me share again there, and we're going to share sound. All right, let me play this for you real quick. If I remember correctly, that instrument is called an adongo. I think that's right. And they had a number of them. It's basically a harp with a bass at the bottom that's kind of like a guitar. It's a box with a hole in it that is hollow, that amplifies the sound. And so they had, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 of them that are different sizes. So they're all basically tuned together doing different parts. You can see, I think this one here. The background works. One thing about Chris. So Chris is a graphic artist. He has a graphic arts business doing logos and things like that, including printing banners. All the banners and signs that you're going to see in these pictures, Chris did all that work. So in Bukedea, there's actually 4 A2K churches in Bukedea. Bukedea is both a town and a district, which if you're in the US, a district is roughly equivalent to a county. And so there's Bukedea town, where there was I think I have a kind of a picture of it. Bukedea town has a church, and then there are 3 churches out in more rural settings. This is one of those. This Pastor Joseph over here on the right. So here's some of the folks that were with us. This is Francis right back here in the back with the yellow vest. This is actually his church, and he was one of the main organizers of all the meetings, and one of the main spokespeople. Standing next to him with the big smile with the blue suit and the white shirt, that's Elvis Okello. And Elvis is he's on the board in Uganda. He is the director over the church network. And so he's constantly organizing things going on between the pastors. They have a meeting coming up in early December where they're all going to get together that he's planning out. To the left over here, that's standing next to me, that's Moses Kuizo. He's the pastor of the church in Bukedea town itself. In the front to the left, this is Jonathan. I didn't have a picture of Jonathan from the Kampala pictures. He actually met up with us in Kampala. Jonathan is a young man who's been involved, for the last couple of years. He's actually a nursing student, and Allegiance to the King is helping him with his tuition to put him through nursing school. In the middle here, this is another Moses. I'm trying to remember his last name. I'm not going to remember off the top of my head. He was the main translator for most of the trip, and really great guy. He owns a school. He runs basically what would be a preschool and kindergarten school in the U.S. And just a really wonderful man. Next to him is Daniel. And Daniel was one of the organizers. He's not a pastor, but he's very integral into what's happening there. He's works with the organization and really helps. You can tell Daniel has a lot of leadership skills. He's an accountant for the government. Let's see. Here we are. This is the outside of this. This is the inside of that church. And interesting, most of the churches had dirt. They had dirt floors like this. It was very, very hard, compacted dirt floors, and they'd have these corrugated metal roofs. And then you can see the red brick. They make their own brick there. All the buildings are made out of this red brick, and they make the brick themselves. And then you can see that on the outside as well. I'm trying to think if this is I can't remember his name, but he's an assistant to Francis. And then you can see Jackson has joined us. We were standing on top of a mound. This is where Joseph's church eventually will be built. He gave part of his land that he owns for HK Uganda to build a church here. Right now, his church is meeting under basically outside underneath some mango trees. The mango trees were really, really cool there. They were just beautiful. They're big trees. They have big trunks and extremely thick foliage. So if you walk underneath them, you're in pretty dark shade. Everywhere in eastern Uganda is cultivated. It doesn't look like it, but it's cultivated. So when you're looking at this picture here and you see all these plants, it looks like it's just a bunch of weeds, but it's not. You can see the corn that's growing up in here. This plant right in the front, this is cassava, and everywhere it's all cultivated. It just, the way that they do it is they mix plants together and stuff like that. And it's usually, smaller family farms. All the land is, most of it anyway, is owned within clans within the tribe. And so they try to keep all the land inside ownership of the land in the clan that owns that land. Whoever owns it will be a member of the clan, and if they need to sell the land, they're supposed to sell it to some other member of the clan. This was inside Moses's school, and there were a lot of kids. This was not a school day when we were doing this. This was on a Sunday, but there were still a lot of the kids were hanging out there. This is from the second day in Bukedea, and we did a session of prayer for healing for a lot of people who came forward. A few people who are looking to get demons cast out and things like that. It was really a good time. There was a lot of needs. We got all the pastors involved in doing that. This is actually, I don't have a good picture of it right here, but this building is where the Bukedea church meets. This is actually a school that Moses Kwizo and his wife Goretti, here standing over on the right, they own and operate the school. She's the principal of the school. It's a trade school for women learning. I know they're learning tailoring. I think there may have been some other things that they were learning. And the group came over. This is for lunch, and I'll play this. I got a little bit more recording of these guys playing these instruments. This is again Pastor Moses, and this is his wife Grady. These two gentlemen, this is a John, who's a cardiologist, and Samuel, who is a businessman in the area, and they are working on expanding the school. So the two gentlemen on the left, they're on the board of this school, and they're looking to dramatically expand the school into a number of different trades for both men and women. They have a whole plan for that. I actually came back with a copy of their plan. It would take a lot to do it. It's a huge project, but something for us to be praying about. They're doing a lot of really good work there. This is where the other church in the Bukedea district is. This is the church in Allegoy, and you can see where Chris is, just to Chris's right. This is John, again, another John that is the pastor of this church. This is the inside of that church. So unlike the other one that we looked at, it still has a corrugated roof, but it doesn't have the brick walls. They're actually using banana leaves for the walls of this church. Earlier this year, a storm came through and just blew all of that down, and they had to rebuild it. It was so funny when we were standing in here and talking. John's wife came in, and well, I'll tell you what, I'll come back to this picture because I do want to say something about this. So this is his wife over here on the left, and this is one of their children, a little girl. And it was so funny because when she walked in with this baby, this baby was not happy. She was fussing and crying and stuff like that. And she I started looking over at her. She wasn't looking at me yet, but I was looking at her, smiling, trying to wave at her, and she's kind of arching her back and wailing and stuff, and then she kind of turned as she was doing that, turned over towards me, and then saw that I was looking at her, and she just got this look on her face. She immediately stopped crying. She was like, "What in the world? Who are you?" I I would guess maybe she's seen a white person over there. There aren't very many white people in Eastern Uganda. Um, there's a lot of people who still live in primitive housing in Eastern Uganda, or all throughout Uganda.
Did you get to see inside any of those?
Yeah, I didn't go in one,
You
but
didn't?
no, but but it was pretty easy to see in them. These are actually bigger than most of the ones that I saw, and
It's just kind of
but
like a one room type sort of
yeah,
thing that they all live in
yeah,
there.
yeah. It's I think generally they were one room, but they were typically like this, where they would be sort of circling around what I would call a courtyard area. It was dirt, but uh, um, sort of, you could tell the sort of center of where the family is living, and then there would usually be one or two large trees in that courtyard where it was obvious that they would gather, in the heat of the day and that sort of thing. Most, if not all, of these traditional houses would have doors on either side, on opposing sides, which I would assume creates a pretty good breezeway through the building. Again, you can't tell here because they're covered in a kind of a mud outer layer, but these are made with brick, that same brick. This was, so after we left Bukedea, we went and stayed at a little town called Ingora. And Ingora is where Chris lives. If you're looking at a map of Eastern Uganda, it's a little southwest of Soroti, which Soroti is a city. It's a pretty big place. And so this was out the backside of my hotel room, and overlooking this kind of backyard area. All of the hotels had these walls around them with gates. I, you know, it Uganda, at least in the eastern part of the country, it just really had the feel of being a very, very peaceful place. Poor, but very, very, very peaceful. And so the 2 days that we were in, the first time we were in Ngora, was to spend 2 days at a conference in Sereri. So you can see allegiance to the King Sereri there. So there's a A2K church in Sereri. The pastor is David Otim here, which we I don't he's not in the he's either not in the picture or that's him staying there with his back to us. And the first day there, I did another teaching on the gospel of the kingdom of God, and two gentlemen came forward to receive Christ there. And so that was really pretty cool. And then I also taught on baptism there. This is one of the interesting things is they have all throughout the region, every little town or area has a market day once a week. And they'll be on different days, you know, in the region. So one town may have it on Monday, the next town over might have it on Tuesday. And it was pretty wild. It was like a farmer's market on steroids. So I got a little video clip of, I think I have two of these. You can hear Jackson's music in the background. And you can see it's all kinds of clothing that they've got. It was a little challenging to navigate through these market days because they would be so full of people in the road. Oops. And then this is a shot I took out the side so you could see, you know, what it looked like as you went away from in some places where we were meeting, sometimes we would be competing with market day because it's an important day. There's a lot, you know, if you live out in the country, you have limited access to stores or buying things. Most of what you're going to buy is on market day. And you know, it's everything from, again, like clothes and stuff like that to animals that you're going to buy for food, and just about anything you can imagine. On the second day we were in Sereri, we had a session for prayer for healing. Let me see if there's anybody. The gentleman on the far left is an assistant pastor to David here, who is in the blue shirt. That's David Otim. So he's the pastor of the Sereri Church. And just to recap, there's Nicholas, there's Chris. On the other side of me is Elvis. Kneeling down, that's Joseph, Fiona, and then Francis. They had a great sign. I pulled up to the place and they had this really, really great sign out front. It's got the vision and the mission statements, and there's a very long email address for the you know, A2K Uganda. This is out the front of the my hotel room, and so we're looking into the city of Ngora, and one of the more interesting things to me, anyway, here in Ngora, this was a nice hotel. It was great. I really liked that hotel. the people were just so incredibly friendly. And but at about somewhere different every day between 5 o'clock in the morning and about 5:20 or 5:30, you'd get woken up by the morning call to prayer, Islamic call to prayer. Somewhere I saw it, but it wasn't in my view here. There's a tower, and there'd be a guy with a PA system, uh, singing out the morning call to prayers. A lot of the roads in eastern Uganda, the main roads are all paved, but a lot of the roads you go to places are like this, where it's a dirt road, but the way that they do it, they pack that dirt down really, really, really hard. So it's like a dirt asphalt, and they're most of them are very, very good. I mean, we could drive 50 miles an hour down this road without any problems. This was our next place to go. We were actually staying in Soroti when we went here. This is in Kalaki, and they put together a crusade here. And that a lot of the village had come out. You'll see in some pictures here. This is, let me play this little. So John, who's in the front, wait, okay, there we go. Who's in the front here with his arms stretched out. He's the pastor of the church in Bukedea, Alagoy, and I loved the way he would dance. Just, he really would get into it. It doesn't do it justice in this video, but it was still good. It was a lot of fun. They worked so hard. So the morning that this was happening, a bunch of the pastors arrived early at the site, and they built this platform. They went and got wood planks and some, basically created piers underneath, and put this whole little stage together. Did another gospel sermon here. I was starting to get sick by this point. So I'm pretty sure I had COVID here at my household at home. About 3 days into my trip, the first person came down with COVID. And about 5 days into the trip, I started having a sore throat. And so by this day, I can tell you, I look like I'm just speaking here. I was absolutely miserable standing up there. It was all I could do to just not go collapse. And in fact, when I got done, pretty quickly after that, we left and went back to the hotel. And for the next 2 days, I just stayed in bed. And so I actually missed the second day here. We were supposed to do 2 days here in Kalaki. I think. I think we can
because if that's the gospel, that I can just believe something,
can hear the translation.
then I can continue and sing.
You can see the mango trees.
But I have come to see that that was not Jesus's message.
So that was it was a pretty good shot. There were a lot more people kind of off to the right and behind that building. There were people all down the street kind of sitting off to the side and listening. One of the things that I shared about so Uganda is a very beautiful place. It's just very, very beautiful, very green, lush, and a beautiful place, beautiful people. But they really trash it. They there is garbage everywhere, and people just throw garbage out. If they're riding their motorcycle, tossing garbage out to the side, walking down the road, tossing garbage out to the side. And any place where you've got like in a village or a town, typically you're going to have a lot of trash everywhere. And so one of the things I talked about is how the church needs to be the example to the world of God's ways. And so we're commanded as human beings, this is part of the creation covenant, is to tame the earth and make it beautiful. And so, so I talked to the pastors about coming up with some programs where, the churches can go out and lead the way in their communities cleaning up. And looking Rwanda does that as an entire country. Every Saturday morning, everybody in the entire country goes out and cleans up their neighborhoods. And so it really wouldn't take that much. And so it's the kind of thing that we as Christians, we need to be examples to the world of God's ways. And one of those ways is taking care of the earth and making it beautiful. So it seemed to be pretty well received by everybody there. We did another healing session that day in Kalaki. This little baby here that I prayed for, you can see her forehead was just massively sticking out. This is Pastor Moses Odeng in the colorful shirt here. So he's the pastor there in Kalaki, but he also is overseeing the A2K church in Amuria, which they're not too close to each other. It's a little bit of a drive to go from one to the other. And then he's also helping oversee starting a church in a place called Katakwi, which I didn't get to go to. I was supposed to, but I didn't get to go to because I was in bed. I was by this point here. I'm smiling in this picture, but I am not smiling. I was really, really feeling bad at this point. I took this picture because this was the strangest looking food that I had while I was there. The food in Uganda is wonderful. I mean, it was really good. I loved the food. It was excellent. And but this this was in Soroti. I was in my hotel room again, just trying to get better. And so they brought me food, and it had this. I didn't know what it was, and it looked kind of like donut dough or something. Like it was powdered donut dough, or and I was thinking, what in the world? So I took a bite, and it was yams. It's just a very strange looking yams, but it was quite tasty. The whole trip, I was I had this expectation that I was going to see African animals, I don't know, giraffes or something, right? I just had that in my head, and I was probably 3 days before I left that I finally saw an African animal, which was a monkey. This little monkey ran across the road in front of our vehicle, and then I saw some African storks at the last hotel I stayed in back in Kampala that were they looked prehistoric. They were really weird and amazing. But the one thing that was sort of what we picture of Africa, at least Eastern, Central Eastern Africa, are these really large rocky mounds that just kind of rise up out of the plain. And they all have like these weird rocks, just big, gigantic boulders just sitting on top of them. You can see this one kind of looks like some sort of, space shuttle or something like that. It's just sitting, it's huge. It's hard to tell from the picture, but that thing is gigantic sitting up there. And then you can see this one That's a big old boulder sitting. It's just sitting on top of the rock, like somebody stacked. Some giant came along and stacked a boulder on top of this little rock mountain. It was very beautiful. It was really, really nice. So the last couple of days, we had a pastors meeting in Ngora. Let's see, I got a little. There's John there again. I don't think he gets into it here in this one. He would get going. He would just dance.
Let's bring.
But this was some really good meetings. We had some couple of days of very, very good meetings that I had the opportunity to share on a number of things. One of the things that I taught on was that the apostles taught a tradition of living a financially responsible life, and that pastors, church leaders, are supposed to be examples of that to the flock. And I taught from 2 Timothy chapter 3, where you see this section where Paul is saying Jesus is commanding us to live responsible lives. And in that context, it's talking about financially responsible lives, and that he emphasizes that he was an example to them of that, to teach them, and that they are supposed to be examples. So the idea is that pastors, rather than utilizing their right to live off the gospel, a lot of the times they're going to be in situations where they need to not do that. They need to be examples to other people of living a financially responsible life, having a skill and a trade of some kind, profession of some kind, where they can earn plenty of money to provide for themselves and their families, and have an abundance beyond that to help other people, and to live that way as an example to everybody else. One of the things it's certainly true in Uganda, it's true here in the U.S. There are far too many church leaders, pastors, that treat being a pastor as a means to income. That, and in some cases it goes from just being an income into greed. And my particular background doing house churches and stuff like that, I hadn't had a lot of exposure to that until the last few years. Most of the pastors that I'd known for many, many years were working people, and it really wasn't an issue. But I've seen it in the last few years where there's just way too many pastors who are, being a pastor is not so much a calling to serve the Lord as it is a means to get ahead in life, and to earn a living, and that sort of thing. And so that was one of the things that I really tried to hammer home, is that this is not optional, it's a commandment. And so most of the core pastors that we have here in Uganda and A2K, they have professions, they have other ways that they're earning a living, and they're doing this. But there are a great number of pastors in Uganda, again, not just Uganda, but here as well, that they don't have any means other than being the pastor of a church to earn a living. And so it's hard for you to be an example to everyone in the church of living that responsible life, going and earning money to pay your own way and stuff like that, and have an abundance to give to others, if how you make your income is, donations, to the church, because it's not like anybody else in the church is going to live that way. So we talked about that. I spent some time on Unitarianism, answering questions. We looked at 3 sections. We looked again at John 1:1. We looked at Galatians 1, and we looked at Hebrews 1, and went through that. I fielded a lot of questions as well. And then I think I'll wrap it up here. I've got some other pictures after this, but this is pretty good. So this was this is not everybody there. This is probably about 2/3 of the people that were at the pastors conference. This is right before we left. Just a quick note here. This is Emma. They call him Emma. It's short for Emmanuel. Here in the blue shirt with the hat. He and his brother Matt, standing kind of next to him in the darker blue shirt, they are the ones working to start a church in Katakwi. So they were able to come down and visit. It was really just, I'm going to go ahead and stop the share here. It was a great time, even though I got sick, and I was really sick for about 2 days. I had sore throat for a few days, and then got really, really sick for about 2 days, and then recovered pretty quickly after that, except for a lot of congestion and stuff like that. I still have a twinge of that. It's been a week since I've been back, and still have a twinge of that. But despite all of that, it was an incredible trip. I really look forward to, taking people with me that want to go on a mission trip there. The hotels that we stayed at were perfectly good for Westerners. There would definitely be places that if we stayed in, it would be tough for a Westerner to stay in some of the places. But the hotels that Chris had lined up were all very good for somebody to stay in. The bed, the food, the environment, the the bathrooms, especially, really are accommodating to Westerners, and so it wasn't really a challenging trip for the most part, except for the sick part. It was pretty easy. And I'd really like to have people who are interested, join me on a trip there. I think you would get incredibly blessed, and it would be a huge blessing for these guys. I know they must have told me 100 times how much it meant to them, my coming there, and how for many of them it sort of legitimized what we were doing, that they could see it was, oh, this is a real thing. And so all in all, it was very, 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 very good. Are there any questions?